day difference, literally. It's such a big difference, and whoa, and it echoes in here now. On the bright side, pun intended, now when we turn on the lights at night, we will be able to have full privacy from the outside world, because before I would turn on the lights and then my neighbors would get like slammed with the brightness. It just made sense to put it long ways instead of up and down. As much as it bothers me that it'll be like different from there. If it was just perfect walls, I would be very satisfied, but the problem with that would be that it would just be very boring and basic. So this kind of adds a little bit more character. Now let's get to work. Hopefully you guys can see what I'm trying to show you, but if you follow this body line, you can see the back of the hood sits perfectly fine, and then the front of the hood actually drops below the fender. So what we're going to do is, obviously in the long run, once we have the latch and everything on there, we're going to do it to where it sits like right there, so it's flush with the rest of the fender. So that'll give us it'll actually give us like 1/4 of an inch, believe it or not, right there. 1/4 of an inch upward on both sides. Underneath the actual hood, we are definitely touching right there. The hood is gonna go up like 1/4 of an inch, like I said, but when it does go up 1/4 of an inch, it lifts off, and even then, this skin is actually loose. If I were to be able to attach this better to this, I would have this much space back. I'm gonna have to whip up something, but for now, we're going to continue to this. So this is the exact spot where this engine is going to sit. We should have plenty of room here for an exhaust, and over here we have miles of room for anything that we could ever use. Most models were now front wheel drive, along with a few all wheel drive. We're just talking to Adrian, and I don't think you guys exactly know the theme of the build. Yes, we're trying to make it a really solid build for YouTube, but it's kind of a budget build. Not kind of, it is a budget build, because I mean, we're on a budget. So we're gonna try to make this to where you guys can do it at home if you have an 86 with like OEM parts, so that you're not like trying to scavenge parts or buying expensive $1,000 of parts. Now we're just trying to figure out where everything needs to sit for it to function the same way it used to function, pretty much. Make everything sit back where it should be, and not a clean way. This side we need about 9.5 inches of subframe. So 9.5 of room here and 10.5. This is what I do half the time. I just like crawl and not do anything. Half of the battle is just looking at things and brainstorming, especially when it's a custom thing and when you're trying to not spend. Budget building. I want to follow the crowd and buy some spacers and a new oil pan, or cut the subframe. Budget building. We're gonna sacrifice a subframe today. Sorry guys. If you're an 86 purist, log off now. You do not want to see this. No, I don't think there's any 86 purists on here, because they would hate to see a K swap in here. Purists, this is your final call. Stop watching, click away. The thing about this is that it'll allow us to keep our mounting locations exactly the same, our suspension mounting locations exactly the same. A steering column, if we can make it fit here, would be ideal. A little bit of oil drop on the back of my head. Damn, Honda's always dripping oil. I do apologize if you're an 86 purist. Pretty much done for whenever I received it. So if anything, I'm reviving it, and it makes me a bigger purist. I don't know. What is up guys? It is the next day. It is actually a late start today, but before we do so, a word from our sponsor. My name is Sam, and I'm addicted to carbonated drinks. Let me update you guys where we're at now. So yesterday we cut off the subframe. We literally just extended the cut from the front to the back. We eliminated the rest of the subframe. Before you guys freak out, we have a subframe on standby. So worst case scenario, we have another one. You gotta sacrifice things whenever you're thinking outside the box. And that is what we're doing. I'm going to start off with the easiest side. First step is finding which of our holes we're going to be using. We went ahead and took the liberty of measuring out. We have our 3 inches by 7 inches marked out right there. We have our 3 inch by 3 feet flat bar, which is very thick. It doesn't look thick on camera maybe, but it is very thick. For the sake of this video, I'm going to show you guys something they don't teach you in school. I'm going to grab some spray paint. I recommend the same one that you already painted your engine with, so it works out better. Only where you have the bolts that you want to be threaded in, make sure you get it on there nice. You're going to grab your steel. Don't touch anything until you're ready. Once you're feeling confident, let it touch. Don't let it move, don't wiggle it, just let it touch. And then you at least have a very good idea of where it's going to go, and now you don't have to guess and do wrong measurements. Okay, good. Now you guys know the drill, literally, so we're gonna drill, and then we have 3 perfect holes. So we have just finished drilling. Now let's see if our ghetto-ness paid off. Obviously, the way that we picked these out was like this. So that's the way we're gonna put it back on. Perfect. They all threaded in. There you go, 3 bolts, just like that. So we're using these 3, then we'll go back, utilize this one. But for now, we're gonna go from here to here. Looks like 6 inches, right there. Some thick metal, but she takes it like a hoss. 1.5 down. Okay, pretty easy. Okay. X marks the spot. Okay guys, voiceover number 30. I'm trying to get this done, but I think I had too much coffee, so I'm talking too fast. But as you guys can see, we center punched this thing, drilled a hole through it, and I gotta say, center punches are making things 10 times more accurate, and I'm actually very happy. I can't believe I just got on the center punch game. But yeah, what do you know? So what we did was we were pretty much trying to get these 2 pieces together, unite them somehow, and I've never done this before, so we're kind of just creating a monster here, just trying to go with what we know and just having fun with it more or less, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's about having a little bit of fun, a little bit of creative freedom. So we ended up doing a lot of little cutouts that ended up surprisingly being exactly the same. Not sure how that happened, but it's very satisfying whenever 2 pieces just randomly come together. I guess that means our measurements are spot on. So we just tacked it together, tried to make it to where it wouldn't move, because once you pull this motor mount from the actual engine bay, you risk it shifting on you quite a bit. So once we had enough tacks in it to where we were sure it wasn't going to go anywhere, we pulled it out, started to create a little drawing, or just essentially creating little shards of metal and throwing them into place, tacking them, making it to where it's fully boxed in, because the last thing you want is the little ends folding on you. So we made sure we had plenty of support all the way around. Then once we were happy with it, we started to weld this whole thing together. I gotta say, I'm not very impressed with this motor mount. The welding came out to be a little rough. I think the biggest issue I was having is that the welding table, actually, it ended up, the steel paint that we have on it ended up hindering our actual welding instead of helping. It helps for the rust, but it does not help in terms of welding. It actually creates, I thought it didn't, but it creates a barrier. So when it comes to it, it doesn't exactly have the best connectivity. You gotta make sure this surface is perfectly flat, because it will be sitting on a perfectly flat surface, so we can't have any extra thick welds popping up. I don't hate the welds, so I'm not gonna clean them up and make them look like, we're just gonna send it the way it is. It's gonna be plenty structural. I will see, I'm contemplating boxing in these little corners so that these flaps have a little more structure. She is installed officially. I'm going to be adding this extra bolt. Those three in the bottom do good. This one will help a lot because those are kind of like on the same axis. So because one could be offset up the top, it would be better for it to not tilt side to side, if that makes any sense. I was looking at this side to see how we're going to go about this. I put the starter on just to see the fitment, or kind of mocked it up. And for sure, it's not gonna really get in our way as long as we have access to this one, as long as we don't bring the sheet too far up. Somewhere around there should be fine. On this side, we pretty much have all of these bolts to mess with. The problem is that unlike the other side, they're all very different on different planes, if that makes sense. So if I put one here, this one's definitely taller than this one, and this one is taller than this one. So it's gonna get a little tricky right here, but I got a feeling these three are gonna be our best friends. So the only thing I do know for sure is that it goes like this to begin with, and one is exactly in this location and the other one is in this location. So this will be used more or less to attach to build it out after that. So I need to figure out exactly where here and here is. Okay guys, here we used a bit of an unorthodox method. We actually cut out a piece of screw, screwed it into our drill, or drilled it essentially, and then we used a vise to bring down the tip. And this actually gave us a perfect center punch for the block. You guys can see nice and sharp, nice and hot. It's a good material. The threads are perfect. Just lined it up with the metal plate that we're going to be using for our mount. Made it to where it barely touches. And then all we did was tap it with a hammer, just ever so slightly, and gave us a perfect center punch. Are you guys asking how I'm gonna get it in the exact same spot as I did for this one? So I noticed that as I tightened it, I also cornered it into this thing, so it just kind of worked that way. I did not plan for this, but if you notice, it'll stop at the same spot every time. So as long as I stop it there and then tighten it, we should be fine. So it's not exactly where I thought it would be, but luckily we do have enough space for a solid bolt on each side. Gloves work, but you can't do anything really well. I wish I had some better quality gloves. All right guys, so here what we ended up doing was we measured out, it came to be the same size as the other side. So it was just a 6-inch flat piece of bar. We tightened it down, started connecting the engine plate to the subframe plate essentially. Got a good measurement, and sorry if in the background you guys hear some snoring. We have Velma the Great Dane being a little loud today. But yeah, so we just cleaned it up, tried to get it as decent as it was, and our measurements are pretty good. The thing is, at this point, we don't know what it's gonna look like, so we can't really get too worried about like all of the aesthetics. We just kind of have to build it to where it'll be functional. And with that, we were trying to find as much pieces that we had, not laying around necessarily, but I like utilizing stuff because I don't like being wasteful. So with that being said, we tried to use this piece of metal. It didn't work out that way. The angles just weren't right. The length was too short. So we ended up just pulling the whole mount again and trying to find a better way. Made sure first, before we pulled it, obviously, that it was very well tacked in so that it wouldn't shift on us at all. Cut this little piece of metal that we had. What we ended up doing was we were trying to box it in just to give it some structure so that it will be more or less prone to flexing on us while we do any welding. And so with that, we just traced out the angle onto this flat piece of metal, cut it out, with the power of snapping, and then started to incorporate this little corner piece essentially. And it wasn't perfect, but luckily with the weld, we could actually successfully mount these two together and kind of close the gap a little bit. You guys can see here that we actually tacked it and it shifted on us a touch. So we were trying to get it back to where it needed to be. And because it is a thick piece of metal, it took a little bit of force to get it back. Once we did though, we made sure it wasn't going anywhere, tacked the corners together. Once we figured out exactly where we wanted it, we wanted to box this thing in. The only issue is that while boxing it in, it created a problem to where we couldn't use our bolt hole. You'll see in a second, we were cutting out the piece that we wanted to extend over the top of the whole thing to kind of box it in even more, so that it's kind of like a full closed circle essentially. But when we went to do that, you'll see in a second here, the bolts actually wouldn't go in. The top part was too close to the bolt hole. If we would have cut it a little bit longer, it should have been fine, but we had to opt for something different since we already had it welded in. So we shortened it a little bit more, that top piece that we cut out, cleaned it up, and then what we ended up doing is putting it under the bolt holes actually, and leaving like a little flap over the top. And then once we were happy with it, we saw that we could use it, we just tacked it in. Tried to make it as simple as possible. I mean, it's not going to be a showpiece. I'd like for it to be more or less accessible, just because we will be throwing this thing in and out quite a bit. Once we were happy though, we pumped it out, and to be honest, this was a very satisfying welding job. It's been a while since I enjoyed welding anything. Wow, this lens got dirty again. There we go, sorry. All right, guys, so we are done with the welding process. That was so satisfying. I think that has been the most satisfying welding job I've done. I don't know if it was the music. I don't know if it was because I was standing, because the shop is relatively clean, or because of the design. There's plenty of things, and my welds turned out pretty solid too. So let me show you guys. It's still really hot. And obviously this is flux welding. I actually went through a whole roll of flux. If you've welded with flux before, you know that's a lot of weld. So it's not the prettiest welding because of the style of welding as well. Flux tends to be a little bit nastier and just horrible. Okay, so you guys can tell it's a very awkward shape. Nothing really, there's no shape like it. I'm very satisfied with it. I think we killed it. I love the color, the blue and all the extra colors going on in it. Unfortunately, we're going to clean it up and spray it just like the other side. It will most likely end up cutting this little chunk off here, the top, because it will go too far and this needs to be a flat surface. So we're going to just cut that lip off, clean everything up, and then spray it. Time to reveal the showpiece. I'm kind of excited about this. I thought we were done, so we sprayed it down. And as I was installing it, I realized that we still haven't spaced it out on those little spots where the bolt sinks. Let me show you guys. This thing is looking phenomenal. I love it. It's like a showpiece now inside the engine bay instead of just an engine mount. Guys, look at that. Jeez. Thing is beautiful. The shapes just make it look sexy. Unfortunately, there's one thing that it doesn't matter how good it looks, it needs to perform, right? So that's what we're gonna do now. We're going to remove the jack and see what happens. Obviously the subframe has not been reinforced yet, and we are going to reinforce the subframe. I'm not just gonna leave it cut. I'm not that much of a savage. It may seem like I went rogue once again by cutting things. That did not happen. You'll see. It should be easy to fix that if everything seems to work like I think it does. We have plenty of room all the way around the tunnel. I'd say about a finger's worth inside, all the way around. So the positioning is perfect. It couldn't be better. The drop test. Oh wow, didn't even move. Take you guys for a spin. The jack is out, the engine is in, mounts are done. It's not hanging off the ground. I don't know if you guys can really see that right there. It does touch still. We gotta find a way for this to sink into where it's supposed to be. Another piece of the puzzle has been about 90% complete. There's a couple odds on each side I'd like to reassess. Unfortunately, we're out of time for today. I've been trying to knock this stuff out before going to work, and it's now time to go to work. So, I can't get over it. I love it. The only thing is we're gonna measure in between these two gaps. This one and then the one in the bottom has a slight gap as well. Maybe like a spacer or something right here. Now we should be able to even put this thing on wheels, lift it without having to be afraid of this thing falling out of the engine. Let's lift this thing up to see what it looks like from the bottom. Obviously the subframe is not finished. This thing is just chopped. You guys can see we actually have more clearance on this side, but thing is I didn't want it to interfere with also the mount. But yeah, we'll address that on the next video. On this side, my welds were still a little on the rusty side. I was still trying to get acclimated, and on this side, they're a lot cleaner. I think I'm gonna piss a lot of people off with cutting a subframe. It's just a subframe. I can unbolt it, buy another one, worst case scenario, and bolt it back in. I have a subframe on standby. I don't think we'll need it, but I have it on standby. And it should be, if I do everything properly, it should be stronger than what it was before. The main reason I chopped it, I wanted to keep the suspension exactly where it was from OEM. A lot of you guys know 86s are known for their handling. Thing is, I didn't want to manipulate the suspension, pickup points, or like anything, because I know that was going to a little bit makes a big difference. That's why people that drift, everybody has their own driving spec. So these cars are essentially made to drive a certain way. That's what makes them fun. So I'm gonna try to not manipulate that essentially, but still add a bigger engine. From what I have envisioned in my head, I like what we have so far. I guess the only way for you guys to appreciate it as much as I do is seeing the finished product and what I have in mind for the finale. And so you guys will just have to hang on and wait like everybody else. And yeah, this is turning out good. I like it. I like it a lot. Yeah, sometimes you gotta think outside the box, and maybe you'll get a tiny bit different but more suitable to you, what you want. So basically, if you buy something pre-made, you're just going to get on your car what somebody else wanted. I'm gonna stop talking your ears away, and that's gonna be all for this one. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for subscribing. If you guys haven't hit the post notifications, apparently that's a thing, and if you don't do it, you don't know sometimes when I post. See you guys next week.